Good evening, alien believers of the interwebs. Welcome back to the corner of YouTube where we not only report on the findings, but we genuinely believe and support them. Before I forget, I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly around here. Did y'all know that research on alien life began as exobiology, which was a term first introduced in 1960 by Nobel laureate Joshua Lederberg to describe the study of life beyond Earth? So this was absorbed by astrobiology, a broader multidisciplinary field that, in addition to its extraterrestrial perspective, has some very Earth-bound objectives, including extremophile biology, molecular evolution, prebiotic chemistry, the origin of life on Earth, and the effect of gravity on organisms. Just, some nifty fun facts before we get started. And with that, welcome to the top 5 scary signs of alien life scientists fear the most. In 5th place, we have a mysterious radio signal. So in February of 2003, astronomers with the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Project, SETI for short, used a massive telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine the 200 sections of the sky which had all previously yielded unexplained radio signals. So these signals had all disappeared, except for one which had become stronger. The signal, widely thought to be the best candidate yet for an alien contact, comes from a spot between the constellations of Pisces and Aries, where there are no obvious stars or planets, named SHGB02+14A. The signal has a frequency of about 1,420 megahertz. So this happens to be one of the main frequencies at which hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, readily absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers have argued that extraterrestrials trying to advertise their presence would be likely to transmit at this frequency, and SETI researchers conventionally scan this part of the radio spectrum. So the telescope has only observed the signal for about a minute in total, which is not long enough for astronomers to analyze it thoroughly. I can already hear y'all now in the comments, but Alexa, how is this scary? So this contributes to the theory that I very much support, that aliens are kind of treating us like animals in a zoo, constantly monitoring and interfering only when need be. Personally, I know I already feel like I'm under a magnifying glass on a regular basis. I don't need sky aliens watching me. Thanks! In 4th place, we have the Viking Mars lander. So taking it all the way back to 1976, when tests performed on Martian soil samples by NASA's Viking landers hinted at chemical evidence of life. 2 Viking landers became the first US spacecrafts from Earth to touch down on Mars. They took the first high-resolution images of the planet, surveyed the planet's geographical features, and analyzed the geological composition of the atmosphere and surface. Perhaps most interestingly, they also performed experiments that searched for signs of microbial life in Martian soil. Overall, these life detection experiments produced surprising and contradictory results. So one experiment, the labeled release or LR experiment, showed that the Martian soil tested positive for metabolism, which is a sign that on Earth would almost certainly suggest the presence of life. However, a related experiment found no trace of organic material, suggesting the absence of life. The LR experiment that reported the positive result mixed soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients and then tested for the production of radioactive methane gas. The production of radioactive methane suggested that something in the soil was metabolizing the nutrients and producing radioactive gas. But since other experiments on board failed to find any evidence of life, NASA declared the result a false positive. So at this point, I would hope that anyone watching this knows that that negative statement, in a sense, only strengthens our arguments. In the 40 years since these experiments, scientists have been able to reconcile the conflicting results, and a small minority of scientists argue that the Viking results were positive for life on Mars. One prominent proponent of this view is Gilbert Levin, experimenter of the Viking LR experiment. At first, Gilbert thought that the LR results were unclear, and stated merely that the results were consistent with biology. However, in 1997, after many years of further experiments on Earth, along with new discoveries on Mars, which NASA has now declared habitable by the way, and the discovery of microorganisms living under conditions on Earth as severe as those on Mars, he and his Viking co-experimenter, Dr. Patricia A. Stratt, have argued that the Mars results are best explained by living organisms. Sadly, all future experiments will have an unavoidable drawback: the potential for contamination by previous landers. In this regard, the Viking landers were unique in that they were the only pristine Martian life detection experiment that we will ever have. In 3rd place, we have Roswell. Look, whether you like it or not, Roswell is easily the most popular and controversial alien and UFO spotting to this day, and there is so much lore around it to not mention it constantly. Former CIA agent Oscar Wayne Wolf claims he saw both living aliens, retrieved parts, and remains of alien ships throughout his career. The agent made these shocking claims about the infamous Area 51, claiming he caught a glimpse of an extraterrestrial spacecraft and a living alien. The 77-year-old man was speaking to UFO researcher Richard Dolan, but concerned about giving up his true identity at the time, went by the anonymous. So after the agent made his claim, it was then shared at the Citizens Hearing on Disclosure held at the National Press Club in Washington in 2013. The agent is understood to have used a fake name throughout his career in the CIA, so the chances of his real name having been used in the account were never high. He worked for the CIA between 1957 and 1960, where he spent time in a military base in the southeast US where they analyzed physical evidence. In 2013, fearing he might soon pass away, the anonymous came forward for one more conversation, this time with, Richard Dolan. He claimed that he was taken into Area 51 to look at items allegedly found and retrieved by the US government. He also claimed among them was a flying saucer that crashed and landed in July of 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. He stated that there were live aliens there and that he was taken to the S4 facility in Area 51. In his statement, he described seeing different saucer crafts in the facility, with the first place he visited holding the Roswell craft, and it was kind of crashed up, but apparently every alien that was in it died except for a few. The Roswell craft was also really strange because it looked like really heavy aluminum foil. At S4, he viewed the autopsy film, where the colonel on screen said, "What we've got in here is we're interviewing a gray alien." So the anonymous had no idea he was going to see the film, saying the alien didn't look human as far as the skin tone and basically the shape of it, and the size of its head, compared with a normal human. Following the interview that he gave publicly, he was warned by the CIA not to conduct any further interviews or disclosures. Well then, if you never see me again, that'll explain it. In second place, we have a 2017 report in the New York Times. Yep, a 2017 report in the New York Times on bizarre sightings kept secret by the US military is the reason the US government now produces an annual report on UAP sightings, and Congress created a system for government whistleblowers to report sightings. More recently, two of the journalists who wrote that report have taken one giant leap forward and reported extraordinary new allegations. In June of 2023, they described jaw-dropping new claims from a decorated former combat officer who served as the US Department of Defense's representative to a UAP task force from 2019 to 2021. David Grush was quoted in their print report and in a later televised interview saying the United States has in its possession an aircraft of non-human origin, and not just one aircraft, he says, but many. He says the discoveries are numerous, involving everything from wreckage up to intact vehicles, and he says these items have been collected for decades by the US government, by allies, and by defense contractors. He says this information is being illegally withheld from members of Congress, and he's alerted them, as well as the Inspector General for the American intelligence community. So authors who reported on his allegations for the science site The Debrief quoted other US officials vouching for David's credibility, including Jonathan Gray, an officer in the intelligence community with a top secret clearance, who stated as follows: "The non-human intelligence phenomenon is real. We are not alone. Retrievals of this kind are not limited to the United States. This is a global phenomenon, and yet a global solution continues to elude us." Once again, if scientists and professionals weren't scared, this wouldn't all be kept secret. Just saying. Not like I consider myself an expert on this subject at this point or anything. And in our first place, we have the Disappearance of Experts. So back in 1968, a group of Soviet engineers who were working in the isolated region of Cao Bang, North Vietnam, in hopes of building a hydroelectric power plant, suddenly heard a rumble of engines overhead. And thinking that it was an American B-52 plane, they all ran out of their tents, but were surprised to instead see a black angular diamond-shaped object approximately twice the size of the moon, and which emitted a greenish-blue light. Moments later, a fiery comet-shaped object emerging somewhere on Earth struck the diamond-shaped object, creating a bright flash that blinded everyone, and then a powerful shockwave knocked the Russian hydrologists down and tore their tents apart, sweeping away all their equipment. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt, but the explosion produced deep concern amongst those present. The original consensus was that a small nuclear device had exploded, since for several hours neither the radio or other communications equipment worked, producing only severe static. It wasn't until the next morning that it was possible for the group to contact their central base and report the incident. The scientists promised a full report of events and visited the closest village where, strangely, there was no sign of destruction or explosion, and the inhabitants only thought that they heard a very loud thunderstorm. So after about 2 days and about a kilometer away from their base camp, the scientists found a black half-sphere-shaped object about 3 meters in diameter. So the surface of the sphere was completely black, and it seemed that light did not reflect from its surface. Also, the sphere did not cast a shadow, with the rays of the low evening sun seeming to go around the strange object, falling on the high grass around it. By touch, the sphere seemed kind of cool and a little bit slippery, as if doused with soapy water. One of the men attempted to scratch the surface of the sphere with a sharp knife and was unable to leave a mark. They then notified their central base about their finding and received instructions from their main base to set up a protective perimeter around the object and guard it until a special group arrived at the site. They were strictly warned to stay 20 meters away from the sphere, so the entire group of 5 men camped exactly 20 meters from the sphere. I would have probably stayed a little farther for safety's sake, but Alrighty, they had no idea what the sphere could be, and guessed it was some kind of new weaponry of either Soviet or American origin. One of the specialists, Boris Ivanov, wrote in his journal that the men spent the evening staring uneasily at the object, in the light of their bonfire, with their carbines ready, just in case of any problems, waiting for the Special Forces group to show up and take control of the situation. At one point in the evening, one of the men named Vyacheslav rose and went into the brushwood for a prosaic outing, while the rest of the men remained at camp. When he didn't return after a too long period of time, the men began to nervously call out his name, but he did not respond. Even after searching the area with flashlights in the direction of the sphere, the men could not find Vyacheslav. Concerned and afraid, the rest of the men decided to not look any further and return to the bonfire. After about an hour, another man, Peter K., silently rose and also went into the brushwood, exactly in the same direction that Vyacheslav had taken. He seemed to move uncomfortably, rocking back and forth, apparently very drowsy. Yep, you guessed it, Peter K. also never returned. This time the remaining men did not search for Peter, but simply sat and waited. After 2 more hours, Vladimir M. felt called to the sphere. And yep, he also never came back. At this point, only 2 men remained, Boris and Sergei. Suddenly, Sergei's face became distorted. He rose like a marionette and meandered away into the dark, in the direction of the strange sphere. Moments later, Boris found himself tempted to move, and terrified, he grabbed his carbine and shot himself in the leg in an attempt to disable himself so he wouldn't walk away to an uncertain fate. As a result of the pain, he passed out, only waking up in the morning when the specialists arrived. They found him, half conscious by the now extinguished bonfire, having lost a lot of red bodily fluid, but still alive. And by this time, the sphere had disappeared, along with his comrades. Add that to another reason why I'm going to continue to avoid camping as a pastime. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I'm a little spooked. All of today's mentions came from credible sources, and it just worries me. Hey, aliens, if you're watching this, I promise, big fan, big fan. Please don't nuke or kidnap me. As always, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.